literacy, because visual literacy, given the way in which media operates, is a type of media literacy. So that is why I think the more and more we kind of bring our students, many of whom have considerable familiarity with visual media, but oftentimes struggle to read text with the same facility that they do images, that kind of allows us an occasion to kind of demonstrate that the knowledge they already have is a literacy skill that they can use in different contexts. And so using the film studies minor and a lot of the classes that we offer as kind of an example, one of the things I'm trying to do today is sell a little bit about the importance of visual literacy, as well as kind of come up with a few exercises. For those of you who teach a lot of film already, like Ashley, this will be pretty pedestrian stuff, so I apologize in advance. And for the others who are, film scholars and so forth, I apologize. But the idea is really to try and meet students where they are and see how the amount of time that they oftentimes spend on their phones, quickly, may be an occasion for us to develop other types of learning. So sorry, I am having a Zoom moment here. Okay. Let me go back. Undoubtedly, one of the things that I start this off with just a picture of how you frequently may see your students at the beginning of each class. I think back nostalgically to that kind of time before class started when you would engage in some banter with students, and they would be kind of perhaps interested in speaking about things. And frequently now, this is how at least I seem to encounter a lot of them staring at their phones. There's a deathly quiet across the room, and it's in part because the representational world from their phone and the visual textual media that they're encountering is taking them away from the present. And so that's where kind of a better sense of kind of getting at what visual literacy is. Visual literacy, I'm just going to remove this. Visual literacy, just what is it? Is the ability to analyze images for how they communicate information, construct meaning, tell stories, while probing how images create worlds, even fake or alternative realities. I just use an image from January 6th as basically the sacking of the Capitol building as a moment where basically media kind of led to a real world type of insurrection against a fundamental structure and institution of our government. And it shows the ways in which the power of images has been able to do this. I'm going to go to a kind of more technical definition, and this is one that has been offered by the Association of College and Research Libraries. And it's a bit of a slog, but I'm just going to read through it. Visual literacy is a set of abilities that enables an individual to effectively find, interpret, evaluate, use, and create images and visual media. Visual literacy skills equip a learner to understand and analyze the contextual, cultural, ethical, aesthetic, intellectual, and technical components involved in the production and use of visual materials. So just to kind of give you a sense, this is one of the operative definitions that has trickled down throughout higher ed. It's gone through higher ed, but it's also trickling down through K through 12 education. There is an increased emphasis on visual and media literacy in K through 12 when the students have time from taking the standardized tests. And so to kind of give you a general summary of what this just said, because that's a lot of words, these are the skills that the students are already trying to do in a lot of our classes: find, interpret, evaluate, use, create in images and visual media. And so this is really kind of a general rehashing of a lot of the work that we do in the classroom, whatever our discipline. I go through just a few points on why visual literacy is important. Students learn to question the naturalness of imagery. Although it is assumed that students are digital natives, they often neglect to weigh how images and media are constructed and how the information images they may encounter are affected by larger social and technological forces. And this is just, something that's, of course, been in the news about how so many of the platforms are proprietary. They basically hoard data from their users. They provide these services for free, but they're getting a whole bunch of information from this data, and a lot of this data is now helping to kind of facilitate some of the artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies that are becoming more and more pervasive, like the ChatGPT, for one example. But one of the things that is often not discussed, except in kind of critical corners, is the ways in which these private corporations are like black boxes. They often have proprietary algorithms that control the information, and in the process may normalize unequal power formations. And this has led to a number of scholars being very critical about how, social justice issues and structural racism, social justice issues will push to the side, and structural racism is often embedded into the technologies because the technologies rely on many of the same histories and biases that we encounter in the real world. It's just not often thought about by most people, and particularly, for example, a lot of our students, about the ways in which technology is not usually value-free. It's oftentimes affected by other forces. How it's used, of course, is another story, but that is a secondary issue for now. Let's see. Okay, for some reason, my PowerPoint is not letting me move forward. Sorry for these technical difficulties.
No, no worries. It's always interesting how Zoom manages to trip us up even after 3 years.
Well, and yes, and one of the things that I'm just going to keep it to the side to avoid this issue. One of the things that, just as an aside, it's very hard to actually have a conversation with Zoom. So I'm sorry if I'm being very kind of content heavy, but it's even with a small group, it's very difficult to have conversations, although perhaps we can in a few minutes. A couple other things, students learn to analyze different forms of visual communication due to these emerging technologies they're already familiar with. They become aware of deep fakes and artificial intelligence and machine learning imagery, and even facial recognition software, which is an increasingly pervasive part of everyday lives. It's frequently used to gain access to your phone, to your bank accounts, and so forth. And a lot of these technologies are, the very fact that they're so normalized, they are starting to alter visual perception, notions of truth and falsity, and concepts of privacy and trust. It's very fascinating to think about the databases that now warehouse so many of our facial imagery to give us access. And the question that always remains is who has access to this? And a lot of it is kept in a black box. Students and faculty learn from multimodal types of learning. As universal design learning scholars contend, students learn differently. I know it seems a very basic point, but that's one of the things that they bring up is that there's a variety of modes become essential for delivering knowledge information, stimulating learning, and fostering variegated modes for expressing what students know. And so it's really interesting to think about the various ways in which we can use visual studies, something that they're already doing, to kind of be a meta commentary on other work they're doing. And this is particularly important in such things as I'll be going over in a second, the ways in which visuals can be altered by cropping or framing, and how these techniques communicate specific meaning to viewers and generate specific emotional and psychological responses. Another thing is when you encourage students to look at the provenance of information and check visual sources for their legitimacy, this is a skill that can be applied to text and research projects. So it's a useful kind of habit to help them both function in our contemporary society, but also a useful skill for the kind of work we're all doing in our classes. A key thing, and this is something I went over earlier, students develop visual learning skills that facilitate their textual literacy while cultivating their transmediation skills. One of the things that we see that's important is this idea that students are used to scrolling and scanning images, but they may not apply those same skills of curiosity and active learning to encountering text. They may spend hours on YouTube going through various videos and so forth, but they would not necessarily spend that same amount of time trying to find a good source for something that you've assigned for your class. And yet it's a way in which we can kind of make connections between this work they're doing and the kind of thing that they that they are, that they should be doing in college, and that's going to help them for workplace success and so forth. And that's because a lot of the times the students aren't sure how to move these skills from across different media. This is where those kind of transmediation skills come into the fore. And students, this is the last point, analyze how reality is reconfigured by representations through such techniques as data visualization. As we accrue data, the representation of data through charts and graphs can skew the data set's meaning. As a result, we need to foster student abilities to analyze data visualization in multiple ways. Okay, and so this is a particularly key point that I think is important to bear on, because it is the ways in which the complexity of data really requires its representation to kind of stand in for what it all means, often can dramatically change its meaning or allow for very different types of reading. And that's a key skill that I know, particularly in some of the social science oriented classes, that a lot of you are doing. And it's something that is also something that can be very helpful to use films as a way of trying to kind of cultivate that skill. I just want to take a break because this has been kind of a lot, and ask, are there any questions? Okay. I will jump ahead and just draw attention to different types of visual media, and just kind of say that there's different things that you can use in your classroom. It's one of the things that, for example, when I'm teaching philosophy, frequently I will, or kind of introductory things to psychoanalysis, I will use some of those series like Freud for Beginners to kind of give students something to think about, because they're filled with images and text, and it does allow them to kind of derive a certain pleasure as they're learning some of these more challenging concepts. But one of the things that I'm just going to spend the rest of the time talking about is some using film to develop visual literacy skills. And one of the things that I just spend a little bit of time doing is define film language terminology to develop what I'm calling slow looking skills and the capacity to pay attention. This is really one of the great struggles that I see with a lot of our students, given the ways in which they're so used to moving between things, moving between media, multitasking, and so forth, that the actual skill of paying attention is often a hot commodity. And so that is kind of the opposite of what they're frequently doing. And so I'm just kind of giving some general definitions with some examples here. This is an example of what I would encourage a student. I would have, bring a complex image like that, or show a scene from a film. This is from, and I usually try to use films that will have, if I'm particularly just using short clips, that are going to have a high emotional connection. In other words, they're going to shock and get the student's attention very quickly. And so for this example, I'm using a clip from David Fincher's Seven, And this is one of the crime scenes. And it is important to kind of think about how within this frame, if I was to ask you to really focus on it, if I could really blow it up, I would be asking the students to look at everything within the frame. And one of the things that you have a whole bunch of what's called Misonsan elements. And the Misonsan elements are the props, there's the costumes, there's the location. It's everything that goes into creating the expressive content within the frame. So lighting is part of this. The various Christmas trees that are hanging to hide the smell of a person who's been sitting there slowly rotting away. And then all of these things are creating both an emotional resonance for the viewer and for the student, but also for helping to kind of create a mood that is conveyed throughout the film. This would be an occasion where I would invite students to kind of consider the lighting. The lighting is dark. There's a high contrast in the lighting. How does that kind of help create some kind of meaning for them? And that is, a key thing to kind of getting them to really focus on an image, something that's done in art history classes, but unless our students are taking art history classes, it's not part of their everyday lives. And yet this very skill of looking at everything within a frame translates into things that we're doing within the text we're reading, to think about what's, to remember, to remind students, go look at the footnotes. These are all parts of what we would call the textual mise-en-scène that are going to create the meaning for each paragraph of a particular sentence, or for a particular book or reading. Another thing is framing. The ways in which a shot is framed. It marks the limit of the visual, but also framing shows helps us think about what's not in the image and helps them to think about what's outside the frame. And I've purposely kind of given you an example here from the Alex Garland film Ex Machina, about the development of an artificial intelligence robot. And this is where we're seeing that the various kind of human elements are overlaid onto the silicon. And in fact, it's almost a moment where this particular robot is realizing that she is a serial object being mass produced at some level. And yet, by showing also here, this is something I frequently try to do, the ways in which the special effects that go into it, this is the reality of how this shot would be constructed. This would be the actress whose name I'm forgetting right now in a green suit, and all of this would be computer generated after the fact. And this is kind of interesting even to think about how there's another character in the background here that doesn't appear in the previous shot, but will appear a little bit later. Moving on, another is shot selection. This affects how the viewer experiences the events unfolding on the screen. High-angle shots show the characters from a position above the character, which makes them seem inferior. One of the things about high-angle shots, they can be used for a number of reasons. I've picked this one from a superheroes film, particularly because of the way in which the superheroes are having a kind of oh shit moment at this particular point in the film, and they're in danger, which is often what is done with the high angle to demonstrate a particular character in danger, but also to kind of depict the person in a position that's less than powerful. They are looking up at something that is about to dominate them. Low angle shots, they depict the character from a position below the character, so they may appear more monumental than it would otherwise. This is, of course, a scene from Stanley Kubrick's great The Shining, where Jack Torrance is locked in a cooler. And in fact, when the shot was taken, Kubrick is actually hanging out right beneath Jack Nicholson for taking the shot, which had apparently like 130 different takes. to get this particular scene. And the way it's framed, it helps to create a generalized sense of how, both that this person is monumental and that this person is not quite right, if you've seen the movie. Close-up shots. Depending on the use, they can subtly indicate the character's state of mind. This, of course, is the famous scene from The Matrix when Morpheus is asking Neo if he wants to take the red pill and come into reality, or continue to live in the simulated reality of the Matrix. And the close-up gives monumentality to Morpheus, but also, even with the glasses, is meant to suggest that he is, at some level, otherworldly. Finally, lighting, low-key lighting is a frequently used. It can convey a somber mood or create a sense of mysteriousness and unease. High-key lighting offers clarity and levity, unless used in high contrast. And one of the things that you'll see is low-key lighting is frequently used in things like film noirs and in horror films, or in films like this scene is from Seven. And one of the things I frequently do in my classes is try to demonstrate the production process that goes into it. So I will show behind the scenes imagery, because it really helps students acknowledge that this finished product, multi-million-dollar finished product, which is there for their entertainment, is really something that each moment is filled with lots and lots of labor, and that labor is often missing from the actual experience. And that's a key thing to understand with every type of film or video that they encounter over their lives. Just because I feel like we're running a little low on time, I just will go through and explain kind of an exercise that I kind of think about doing. And if I had more time, I would show you a clip and kind of work you through this in person. But with one of the things that it's always important to do is when I'm defining the film terms, I show the clips from films for each concept for the students. So if you say a high angle shot, they get an example of that. We then will take the definition and the example, and we'll then try to apply it to actually viewing it within a film. And so I'll show a clip, and I'll ask them to kind of locate the shots, explain what kind of shot is going on. And to do this, I will frequently scaffold questions to kind of really get them to really think about what they've just seen, to kind of focus on everything within, as I was mentioning, everything within the frame, but also their emotional responses to them. And then one of the things that I like to do is to then have, as part of this multimodal learning, is move this from purely an intellectual concept to something that they've learned that they could potentially spit back to me in a test. I ask the students to kind of then do it. So I ask them, one of the things I do is I make sure that everybody has a smartphone. I do a survey at the beginning of the semester to make sure everybody has a smartphone so that I don't do an exercise that makes anybody feel left out in some capacity. But I will ask students to take out their smartphones, walk around the classroom and take several shots. And then I'll ask them to see if they can locate one of the concepts, because hopefully one of the ideas is that they're taking some of these concepts and they're already thinking about them as they're framing them within their phone. And that is kind of a great way to kind of make them feel, connecting directly to them, and kind of taking this out of just something that's abstract and something that's kind of boring to learn, because a lot of the students may be taking this merely to pass a requirement, but to kind of demonstrate that this is something that they can do as well. And many of our students, in fact, that come to the film studies minor are actually very interested in producing their own content in a lot of ways. And then finally, I will end class with a real-world application of framing a shot in Misonsan. And I invite students to read something mundane like the John Jay College homepage or YouTube to analyze these processes at work and connect their presence to their real lives. And I just because we've pretty much run out of time, I just wanted to, one of the things, an exercise that I will ask students to do is just look at the John Jay webpage, the new one, And it's a kind of interesting because you have a film going on here. And I'll ask them to look at what are the 2 things you really notice about this, or I'm sorry, the 3 or 4 things you really notice about this. And they'll see the logo, they'll see be a fierce advocate for justice, our kind of marketing, branding, and then they'll see donate now and apply now. But they don't really see all that much work of the university. You have to click on the next thing to get to that. And if you look at the imagery, you'll see that teachers appear once in this entire thing. And the classroom is only kind of appearing twice in the entire thing. So it's an interesting way in which I ask students to kind of look at what college is, but also how John Jay, in some ways, is marketing itself to them and potentially how it thinks of them. And so I'll stop with that. I want to cede the floor to Ellen, because I've taken a couple extra minutes because we started late. But I don't know if there are any questions. Sorry for that being so kind of grindingly long, but
No, not at all. No problem. I'm intrigued by the clips and the webpage analysis. Maybe we can go back to those clips in a few minutes. That would be kind of fun. But questions before I start talking about how to find films. Seeing none, I'm going to see if my Zoom skills will let me share a screen. Okay, good, and they do. Okay, and I'm going to stop sharing because I'm going to stop sharing something else. So, of course, finding films can be a challenge. And what I want to talk about is, I want to just show you very briefly how to find what we already have and how you can, not so much how you can request that we get films for you, but to tell you kind of a little bit about the challenges and the blocks and the opportunities that we run into when we go looking for these films. So I'm sharing the library homepage at the moment. About maybe 80% of the films and documentaries that we have are actually discoverable with the One Search tool. And you just go to the library homepage, go to the search box in the middle of the page and type in the title of the film that you're looking for. Or if you're looking for a film about a person or about a concept, type that in. Limit the search to videos, just clicking the little button, radio button there, and click on search. It's going to throw out all the text formats. We'll just get the video formats coming up, and you get a list. Various things by and about and featuring James Baldwin. This first one here, The Price of the Ticket, available online. This record tells us it's in something called Films on Demand, which is one of our 2 big bundles of video content. And clicking on that will bring us in. The great thing about this Films on Demand package is well, apart from the content, it is very accessible. It has a transcript on the side. It's shareable, and I think, can it actually speak to us? I'm not sure about that. Oh no, that's not an issue. Okay. So if you wanted to embed this link into your Blackboard, you can. There's an embed link, and there's also a regular link that you can copy and paste wherever you want. And it is already proxied, so students will be able to access that from home, from off campus. Okay. I hope you're currently seeing a clip of James Baldwin, The Price of a Ticket. I'm hoping that's the right window that's showing it. If it's not, please tell me. Okay, the other way that you can navigate the films that we have, in addition to going to One Search, you can go to our film guide. Whoops. up under Find and Borrow, Media, Streaming Video Collections, we have a guide here that tells you all the various different collections that we have and lets you browse films by discipline. The second tab here, browse films by discipline. So if you're looking for criminal justice films, anthropology films, films that have won Academy Awards or Sundance Awards or whatever, these are links that will bring you through to various different packages. For example, we have a bunch of films from a documentary producer and distributor called DocuSeek here. We have criminal justice and public safety films in our package called Avon, law and criminal justice films, the ones that are currently active on Canopy. This is a way that you can kind of browse through, see what we already have. Here's DocuSeek. And just get a sense of our collections. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the PowerPoint again. Okay, good. Okay, we do have packages of instructional videos, which are kind of mostly talking heads videos, interviews with academics and practitioners in criminal justice in the Sage Criminology video collection and also Sage Research Methods collection. I'm not going to talk about those today. Okay, now I'm running into the problem where, there we go. Okay, what I do want to talk about is what happens when you want a particular film or particular documentary. What can we in the library do for you? First of all, I would like you to consider a typical distribution pattern. So film, is our documentary typically shown, first of all, at a film festival, or a number of film festivals. They're shown there to get a bit of publicity and to get picked up by a commercial distributor. So if it impresses a distributor, they'll pick it up and they'll sell it to theaters for as long as they can, for as long as it makes money for them. Then next step is usually licensing for streaming direct to consumers on Amazon or Netflix or Apple TV. Next, television, cable television or public television. And then almost at the very end, it's when we come in, the educational institutions, colleges, schools. There are certain platforms that we can acquire streaming content from. Swank, Canopy, Alex Street, ProQuest, DocuSeek. These are all the educational packages that we can get pretty easily. So there are a number of different kind of models for educational distribution, A, B, and C here. There's the old-fashioned one, which is when the vendor sells us a big package of content, and with the expectation that professors will browse the content. Sorry, excuse me. Will browse the content, looking for something appropriate for a particular class. And our two big collections are Films on Demand, where the James Baldwin clip came from, and one from ProQuest called Academic Video on Demand, Avon. In addition to that, we have a kind of an a la carte approach. There are vendors called Swank and Canopy, where they present the possibility to us of acquiring a whole bunch of specific titles. Professor decides, well, I want to show 7 to my class. So I go to Swank and see, do you have 7? Can I buy a license for it from Swank? And if I can, I get a URL and can send it to the professor. That's a model that I would prefer, except here we run into the problem that not everything is available from any one vendor. Both Swank and Canopy, their catalogs are relatively limited compared to the huge amount of film that has actually been created. And then there's a third option, which as a small college, under-resourced college, we can't do. But the huge, well-funded universities across the country, other universities do this. They buy a license and they stream content on their own media server. We don't have a media server. CUNY doesn't have media servers. Unfortunately, that is something that is actually quite frustrating. However, okay. Film distribution is very fragmented, as you know. If you're watching Netflix, you're watching Amazon Prime, the amount of content that they have compared to, say, the amount of DVDs that exist in the world is tiny. Swank is wonderful. It is great for feature films produced by the Hollywood studios, not so great for the independent stuff, and really doesn't do documentaries at all. Some of the documentaries that our community is quite interested in tend to be low budget productions, very limited distribution, and they kind of get orphaned pretty quickly. If we're lucky, they get picked up by one of the educational distributors and sold to us in a package like Avon or Films on Demand. Quite often they're just kind of lost, they disappear. Film producers from some countries, particularly West Africa, with robust pirating practices, don't release content at all on DVDs. And even if they did, we do have a DVD collection. We do continue to buy DVDs on criminal justice related matters, but we don't have the ability to stream them. And that is a problem with our current sort of hybrid modality and our current emphasis on getting content to students, regardless of whether they're on campus or not. Oh, and last of all, we do have budget issues, but the budget issues are kind of in some ways the easiest to overcome. It's just a matter of finding the money. Finding the content that we can stream really is more of a challenge. Oh, and then there are the CUNY end of things. Procurement is complicated at CUNY. It is also very slow. Vendors have to be willing to wait a long time to get paid. They have to be willing to sign up with CUNY to be paid. It can be quite challenging. We have discovered over the last couple of years, it's almost impossible to pay vendors now that are located outside the US. We can pay them, you know, we have a credit card that kind of helps a little bit, but it's still kind of difficult. In terms of streaming content, sometimes we have an option to purchase the content for perpetuity, otherwise known as the life of the file. This is actually rare and it's expensive. A 12-month license for a film might cost us $150 to stream it for 12 months. To purchase the same content, if it's available at all, is maybe $500. And then we have to pay a hosting fee anyway of about $25 a year in perpetuity, or as long as the file lasts from then on. And it's the distributor who decides how they want to sell the content to us. Then there's the intellectual property end of things. As a librarian, I'm used to think about copyright for text, which is much simpler than for film. For film, there's so many intellectual property rights involved: the writers, the actors, music. For documentaries, this can be particularly problematic if the documentary makers often include content that is owned by other people. They might show a clip in the documentary for which they need to get permission to show that clip, and that might involve a lot of money, and it involves getting permission from somebody. That permission might be revoked, or they may not have the money to pay for it. And then you end up with a situation where you cannot distribute your documentary because you can't comply, you're unable or unwilling to comply with some requirement of a copyright holder of a clip or a photograph or a piece of music that is an integral part of your documentary. So one of these examples here, this piece was written back in 2004, but I couldn't find something more up to date easily and quickly. But the examples just give you an idea as to what the sort of problems documentary makers run into. Strange Fruit, documentary about lynching, depended on music that couldn't be cleared for home video, so it could not be distributed to the home video market. So rights that are, even if the movie or the documentary, if all the intellectual property rights have been cleared for, say, theatrical distribution, if then they want to stream on one of the residential or educational platforms, then they have to make sure that they have rights which they may not have bothered to negotiate in the first place. So they might have to go back and talk to a whole bunch of different people and their lawyers in order to clear that up. Or they might not, they might just not bother. Okay, so some examples of things that professors have actually asked me to get. The problem with APU. So a documentary that was broadcast first on something called True TV, you know, an internet TV channel. It's not there anymore. Now it's available on Amazon Prime and on Apple TV, and neither of these services will sell to an educational institution. They're direct-to-consumer businesses. We don't have access to that content. This one was more straightforward. Judas and the Black Messiah, released in theaters in February 21, went on to DVD pretty quickly afterwards, and it was available to us to license for 12 months through the Swank vendor. So yes, this one we could get for the professor. Netflix and Amazon Prime, these are kind of tricky. They create content and they license content for distribution just through their platforms, but they sell direct to consumer. They don't sell DVDs of their own products, and they don't. There's no way for us as an educational institution to actually acquire their content. So I love The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I have actually been trying to get a DVD of this for a very long time, and it's impossible. Produced by Amazon, they sell a book about costumes, they sell a game, and they sell the music on DVD, on CD. Well, they sell the music, but they don't actually sell the series itself. It's just so frustrating, and this is actually pretty typical. Netflix will permit instructors to screen many of their documentaries as long as the instructor has a personal account. But again, the library has no role here, unfortunately. Going back to the idea of a college having a media server, this is our tiny version of doing that. On very rare occasions, there have been films that people have really wanted that we haven't managed, that were not available from any of the educational streaming vendors, that people have really wanted us to get. So I've managed to get the content straight from a distributor and hosted on a commercial platform, Alexander Street. It looks kind of awful. We don't see any pictures here, but it works. We can actually stream Coded Bias, Obscuro Barocco, and Paradise Discovered. We can actually stream those to students. This is not scalable. It takes an awful lot of time to get this to work and to make the purchases. So unfortunately, not at all scalable. So that's just to give you an idea as to the issues that we can have with acquiring streaming content. Okay, so so have any of you actually, well, I have had a conversation with a film professor who's not actually currently present when I was asking him, well, how do you get films for your students? And he just laughed at me and said, you don't want to know. But I do want to know. I am aware that there are pirated, there are pirate ways of acquiring video content. I have heard of BitTorrent and various other things like this, and I don't do them myself, but I know they're out there. I think it's not something we really want to encourage students to do. Certainly not for their coursework. I would actually prefer to legitimately get the content for them through some other ways, through legitimate ways where we're actually paying the content producers for their work. He also mentioned to me that students don't actually watch things in the way they're supposed to be watched. They watch them on small screens, very small screens, and they watch them at double, triple, and quadruple speed, which kind of changes the experience of watching a film. So I am curious as to what your experiences are and what they're doing with you.
Ellen, I think I know who you're talking about, because I think I helped him to download certain things illegally. When I first came here in 2017, it was from the English department. He actually left now, the school. He retired, right?
He
But he was
unfortunately
the same
did.
person. Yeah, he was a nice guy. I mean,
Lovely.
yeah, lovely. And I gave him some ways to that time. I think there was certain ways to break the code and pretty much download videos illegally. So I actually share some of the information. So I think I know who you're talking to.
I
But
brought
anyhow,
it all the time. I just, I just.
yeah. But yeah, it was interesting.
It is very interesting.
But this is great. I mean, I get most of my videos because I use a lot of technical videos on my Blackboard. For every lecture, I use at least 5, 6 of them. But I get them from YouTube, especially, and I get also a lot of stuff from PBS, from Frontline. I show you a lot of Frontline. Some of the documentaries that they have about AI and privacy issues, and I get all kinds of videos from overseas sometimes because they're more widely available from other schools. So I don't usually use the library, but since you show a lot of stuff, I hope I find something. But I use a lot of videos in my lectures, and as Paul said before, we're in a society that we're very visual, and if you don't incorporate visualization in the lectures, they don't care. I mean, they don't even pay attention. So you constantly have to use color, have to use framing, and all these things that we take for granted. That if you want the attention, you have to use all these elements, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I'll just add that Lyle. I'm sorry, I left his name out there. Yes, he's not here anymore. I think he retired.
All right.
I think he's in Ireland now again.
Yes.
So, yes, so he's far away from the IP authorities in the United States.
He moved to Ireland. He moved to Ireland.
Yeah.
It's funny. I met him on a jury duty before I came here, and we kind of became kind of friends. Then we exchanged information, how to download stuff. I gave him all kinds of information that I had, because I used to teach classes, multimedia classes at SUNY before I came here. So, but Lyle was great.
Yeah, just to pick up on one of the things that Lyle said, a lot of, what's fascinating is a lot of students don't, have never watched a film. I will have students who will actually sign up for introduction to film, and they've never watched a feature-length film, and they've certainly never seen it in a movie theater. And they are watching them on their phones. Sometimes they're, more since the pandemic, they're watching them on their computers because a lot of students got laptops either through the college or in various ways. So they are, and they're getting them illegally. Even when I assign and put versions available, thanks to Ellen and I frequently interact every semester, and I get videos. My students will go find downloaded pirated copies because they don't want to have to go onto Blackboard, because it's easier for them to do that, and they have more facility because that's where they're watching their content anyways, through these sites. So they actually have to go to Blackboard and interface with that is 3 steps too much. And so I'll always ask, for example, like going back to the issue, I'll ask, what's your favorite film? And most actually think series, because I found that a lot of the students do have subscriptions to Netflix. It is almost something that I've never found it not to be an issue. I've actually built it into my syllabus when it's really required for some of the documentary classes. And the students are okay with it because basically a subscription is something, it's like buying a book. You can do it and then get rid of it as long as you remember to cancel it. So that's a strategy I've used when the library hasn't been able to procure things, because it's moving forward. I've also found the Internet Archive frequently have copies of particularly classic films and documentaries and they'll host them, and you can rent them, and that I've used many times, and it's been indispensable.
I wanted to follow up on that. It's good to know that a lot of students have access to Netflix. I wanted to ask that on the first day of class, because I am teaching the documentary class, so they will need to watch quite a few films this semester. But I wanted to ask, do you typically chat with Ellen about like all of the films that you have on your syllabus for the semester, and then just try to tackle it at the beginning and provide links and like go about it that way? And Ellen, like, how do you prefer communication in terms of requesting films?
Email definitely. Send me an email with the information about the films that you want, you know, enough so that I can identify them. And yeah, that's it. And then I'll get back to you if I need more information. Swank requires a sentence about what is the purpose of showing this in class. So if I'm getting it from Swank, I'll bother you about that. If I'm getting it from Canopy, I just press the button. And if I can't get it at all, I will let you know. So beginning of the semester is a perfect time. If generally speaking, at least a week before you want to use it. And if you're only emailing me a week in advance, have a backup plan. Because
Sure.
quite often there's stuff I can't get.
Great.
Yeah, as you know, one of the things, I've gotten in the habit of, I would do it at the beginning of the semester, and then at times when because of the year licensing frequently for some of them, I will in fact just try to stagger it. So I'll do it with each month so that I can try, if I'm teaching the same class again, I can build in so I don't have to ask Ellen to get the subscription again. Just kind of, if I have my act together, it's just something, you know, to consider if you're that organized. But you know, the simpler thing is just to do it at the beginning of the semester.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and if you're teaching it again in a year's time, try to remember that the licenses would have to be renewed.
And one thing I encourage you to do actually is, if you have something that's available for free at one point, is constantly go back and check, because the licensing changes. So I taught a horror film class at one point, and I had 28 days later on my syllabus, and it was readily available on one of the free services. And then for whatever reason, because the studios were fighting, the entire, it was no longer available in any way through any streaming in the United States. And so I had to totally pivot and change the film, because there was no possible, I shouldn't use physical, there was no possible way for me to get a virtual copy of it. And my one copy, you know, my DVD, and asking students to look at that in the library is just not a way to go anymore. We've reached 3:01, so yeah. I don't know if there are any other questions, but I know everybody's starting some semester tomorrow, so.
Okay, I'm going to put in the chat the email address to the library, or just email me directly for films. thebref@jjy.cuny.edu has somebody reading it every day. Or you can just email me, because they'll all end up with me anyway, the film queries. Nope, cannot spell my own name. There we go. Okay, yeah, so anyone who's looking for films, just email me. Okay, thank you, everyone. Totally out of time. Thank you very much for coming. And now we can all go and watch the exciting AI large learning language. That is a tongue twister. Large learning model workshop on the other Zoom channel. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. See you all around.
Thank you so much.